Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome to another edition of the SportsShop27. I'm your host, Jermaine Colter. To my far right, Kevin Johnson, KJ. And today's special guest, we have former Clemson Hall of Famer, Billy Billy D.
How you doing,
D. Yeah.
What's going on, man?
Nothing much.
Yeah.
Not much, man. Show. We got a legend in the house today.
Yes.
Honored, man.
Yes, man.
I'm excited.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm for real, man. I'm excited. I heard a lot about you. Everybody's been texting me since I blasted the post on Facebook. Like,
yes.
Wow, that's big. So, hey, introduce yourself, let everybody know where you're from, and tell them a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm originally from Western Pennsylvania. I grew up in a small coal mining town about 14 miles southwest of Pittsburgh. My dad was a coal miner. He came from immigrant parents, and we grew up in company housing, and I played all three sports: football, basketball, and baseball in high school.
Wow.
And, I was very fortunate and blessed. I have two brothers. I have an older brother that was really a good athlete, and he went to East Tennessee State on a football scholarship. And then my middle brother was a good athlete as well, but he broke his arm his senior year. He ended up going to the Navy. And probably would have gotten some scholarships. And then I went to Indiana State. I went there as a tight end, and during my sophomore year, there actually were two really good tight ends in front of me.
Okay.
And we had a couple centers that got hurt. One guy broke his neck, had a cervical injury, and another one had a knee injury. And so Coach Larry Vanderhaden, who was my college coach, who coached here at Clemson, I coached with him for years, and asked me to move to center. And, of course, we ran the wishbone. Now, I wasn't very big and strong, but I could reach block you and get my head across. And give it to the fullback. He was off and running. So I played center for 3 years, and probably wouldn't have played if I'd have stayed as a tight end. And then I actually was a criminal justice major.
Okay.
And when I graduated, I came home and I took the Pennsylvania State Police test, and I actually painted for my dad for a little bit. He had a little painting thing on the side, and I painted for him.
Okay. During
that summer, and they weren't going to take any applicants until like October. So during that summer, Coach Vanderhaden, who had left Indiana State and went to East Carolina as the offensive coordinator, called me and had a graduate assistantship available and wanted me to know. I never even heard of East Carolina. Wow. And I drove down there with one of my high school friends and took the GRE on a Saturday to get into school. And I ended up coaching for an all-pro wide receiver named Sonny Randall, who was the head coach. He played about 12 years in the National Football League, played for the Redskins, but primarily played for the St. Louis Cardinals. And he was really a good player. And I was there for 2 years. And then after my first year, he left and went to Virginia. And he offered me an opportunity to go, but I really wanted to finish my master's. So I ended up staying there and coaching for Pat Dot, who was at Auburn for a long time, who just passed away, as a matter of fact. The other graduate assistant at East Carolina and myself, Jack White, we actually went to his memorial. And he was, he kept us. He was very good to us. He taught us a lot of football. And then when I actually got my master's, I went to Virginia Sonny Randall still offered me a job. And, when we were at Virginia, that was before you guys were born. That was in the 70s,
Yeah.
late 70s. And, Virginia had some very rigid admission standards.
Oh, yeah.
They wouldn't let athletes in under the admission standards. You had to have a certain SAT score, and you had to have 2 years of the language, and it was just a difficult place. Very similar to the standards like Vanderbilt has, or Rice, or
Oh, yeah.
Northwestern, and all that. And we were competitive, but after 3 years, he actually got in a little bit of trouble with the administration, and he got fired. And so I ended up going to a military school. It was a postgraduate school, very similar to Fort Union. It was called Massanutten Military Academy.
Okay.
I was the head coach there, and at that time, that's when the SAT was kind of changing. It was going from really no threshold to 700, and institutions were putting some benchmarks on admission. So we were getting a lot of kids that needed that preparatory, coursework. And we played all the JV teams like Virginia Military, Virginia Tech. We played James Madison. We played North Carolina Navy, and then there were a couple of prep schools at that time that we played, and very successful. And then I ended up going to Catawba. I coached with a guy that was at Virginia who took the head job at Catawba. And I was there for a couple of years, and he got let go. And so I came to spring practice. Excuse me. I came to spring practice, and Coach Vanderhayden was here. And, I didn't know what I was going to do. And Coach Ford, I talked with him. He said, look, at that time, you could only have 8 assistant coaches. And he said, I don't have a position. But he said, if you want to come as a graduate assistant, even though I had my master's, So I came as a grad assistant, and I ran the dorm at Malden Hall. And then I was only there for a year. And then Coach Ford helped me get the offensive line job at Southern Miss.
Okay.
I was at Southern Miss for a couple of years, and then he hired me back at Clemson in '84, and I've been here since. And then when he got let go, Bobby Robinson, the athletic director, for some reason, gave me an opportunity to stay. And of course, I was probably 38, 37, and I really wanted to coach. But, Coach Ford, we had a little reputation about compliance issues and stuff like that. So there were some schools that were, were a little arm's length. And so I ended up staying, and I worked in the athletic department for about 6 months. And then the IPTAY board approved an academic support facility, which was Victory Hall, which was it had an academic component, it had a personal growth component, it had a career component, and of course an athletic component. And it was really academic advising, study hall, tutoring, and it's kind of like I told a lot of kids, and I understand. I mean, I grew up. I was very fortunate to get a scholarship. I grew up in an area where not a lot of kids went to schools, and but I know a lot of the kids, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they have their sights on the NFL. As a matter of fact, they pay pretty good, if you know. So there's nothing wrong with having your sights on that. But what I really tried to do is get them to understand that, less than 2% of the players are really going to play in the NFL.
That's right.
And even if you do play in the NFL, you have to be prepared for life. And I've told them this candidly. I said, look, if you're just putting, all your feathers in the cap to go to the NFL and you're squandering the opportunity to get a degree, you're allowing the institution to prostitute you.
That's right.
And by using you, and they really,
That's right. Tell them
and so, I think, I think that was one of the things that kids could identify with. That, I was telling them the truth. Say, look, and you'd see it all the time. Somebody may have kind of just, they were warm towards school, but they knew they had the athletic ability. But then they'd go for a year or two and get cut, and they'd come back and say, Billy D, I need to get my degree.
right.
And we always helped. Clemson always gave them an opportunity to come back to school, and we paid for their. The ultimate thing is for you to graduate, and it doesn't make any difference if you graduate in, sociology or PRTM, because most employers are going to ask you one question: did you graduate?
That's right.
They're not going to ask you your grade point average. They're not going to ask you, what you learned. They're going to ask you if you graduated.
That's right.
And that's what we wanted to achieve.
Great.
And I think looking back, I'm certainly not trying to shine on myself, but I think we built a solid foundation in Vickery Hall. Now it's moved to the West End zone. There was a donor that gave a very significant gift, and they moved all the resources and the advising into the West End zone, as the West End zone moved over to the Reeves Center. So, but it's called the Neary Center now. Mike Neary was one of the donors that gave a significant amount of money to name that after him. But, it still has the same tentacles and whatnot, and help for kids.
Okay, cool. Go ahead, KJ.
Yeah, so take me back to your childhood. Now, what age did you start playing football?
Well, back then they really didn't have, like these little 9-year-olds. I really started in 8th grade in JV.
Okay.
And I was actually a quarterback back then, but I got a little bit, I was kind of one of the taller ones and a little bigger, so they ended up moving me to tight end, and I played linebacker on defense. So actually,
hard nose.
My high school team, my senior year, we played in the state championship game in a downpour and lost 7-6. We were afraid to kick the extra point because it was raining so hard, but we got stopped in the 2-point conversion.
Oh man!
So yeah.
So
and that was in 1968, and that was even before you were thought of.
Yes, both of us. Yes, that's like 12 years before.
Yeah, that's history right there.
What other schools were you interested in at that time coming out of high school?
I knew I didn't want to work in the coal mine. I always kind of had always been interested in police work, and I kind of like the FBI. I like those kind of stories and stuff, and I think that's what led me to majoring in criminal justice and whatnot. I'm kind of for the underdog. I believe people need a second chance.
Yeah.
It's just, I think I was raised that way, that, and so I've always kind of been for the underdog, people that may have not had the resources to be successful, and that's been a little bit of my DNA. So.
So can you tell us how football and sports was a major impact for you in your life, coming from the neighborhood that you came from and the time that you grew up in?
Absolutely.
Good question, Jermaine. Good
You know,
question, man.
I think athletics, and and I played all the sports, but I think athletics is the true education of life.
Yes,
I think it teaches you discipline. I think it teaches you teamwork,
that's right.
teaches you how to get along with teamwork, people you may not like, but
First,
you're playing together, you're persevering toward the same goal. I think it teaches you time management. I just think there are so many elements and so many components that it gives you exposure to that carry over and are successful elements to life. I mean, you got to be on time, right, Jermaine?
yes, sir.
That's
Oh,
right.
Huh? You can't be fashionably late, right?
sir.
No, you
So,
cannot.
so,
You get punished.
but I do. I think those things, it teaches you adversity. It teaches you when you get knocked down, it teaches you that you're not always going to be the starter.
That's
You're
right.
not always going to be the star.
Yep.
It teaches you that there's a role to play. And,
Yeah.
and I think that those elements of being on a team teach you, it's a true replication of going into the real world and working for somebody.
Right.
That's right. That's right. Good stuff.
So, what was your favorite sport playing out of the three?
Well, I certainly like football. I
Okay.
mean, you know that, Not actually, I was on a pretty good basketball team, but I was a sixth player.
Yeah, I was
I,
going to ask that because of your height, and you played quarterback.
No,
So let me
no,
get you challenged.
I sat on the bench. I learned a lot.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's good, man.
I
So,
actually played. I actually played with a guy that scored 58 points in the game in high school.
what's his
Yeah,
name?
and he was 5'10". He was a little point guard, and he ended up going to North Dakota State, and he became a pretty good player there. I think he's in the Hall of Fame out there.
Oh,
But he was only
cool.
5'10". He was a heck of a player.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, any like inspirational stories you have from players that you coach and people that you mentor?
Well, I don't know if Kevin, do you remember Warren Forney?
No, sir. I don't remember him.
Okay. Yeah, I want to tell you this story. When in 1989, we were recruiting a young man named Warren Forney from Rutherfordton, North Carolina.
Okay.
And Warren, and this tells me that the SAT is not an indicator of academic success or intelligence or anything. But Warren was really a good player in high school. And he had taken the SAT, I think, the spring of his junior year, and he had taken it 2 or 3 times his senior year,
Hmm.
and he had not passed it. He had not gotten the qualifying score. I think it was 700 back then.
Yep.
Okay.
So we still were recruiting him, and of course we ended up actually, Coach Ford got fired, but I got retained.
Okay.
Well, Warren went to Fort Union,
Uh-huh.
and to make a long story short, he ended up taking the SAT 11 times and finally passed it. Now he came to Clemson, and he made the honor roll every semester he was at Clemson. And at graduation, he received one of the most significant and prestigious awards, which is the Algernon Sidney Sullivan Award, which depicts academics, athletics, and community service. And I mean, that is a great story for
Yes.
someone to talk about being persistent. And now Warren, I think, is the vice president of a firm in Texas. but
Wow.
very successful. And
Congratulations.
I saw a lot of kids come in. That they didn't come there necessarily to get a degree.
Uh-huh.
But what was really gratifying is, you kind of had to cajole them, you had to scare them, you had to threaten them. But what was great to see is to see somebody become an independent learner, where you didn't have to force them in the study hall. They knew what time management.
Yeah. Yes,
They
sir.
knew how to study. They began to learn a retrieval system, how to take the notes, and how to study and stuff like that. And I'd have guys that would come in and say, "Billy D, look at my test score. They have a B on it." The light came on, and that was really gratifying to see them to take that ownership in themselves.
So, that goes to say for our mission statement, or our segue goes into it's not how you start, it's how you
Start,
finish.
finish.
That's
That's
right.
right.
That's our logo,
That's
our
right.
motto. But that's great that you feel so proud of an athlete or a student um, passing a class and making a high grade, and you're
Yeah.
talking about that more than them scoring a touchdown in their
Yeah.
athletic.
Putting academics
Right.
first. Mm-hmm.
So that says a lot about yourself as an individual.
Those athletic careers are short-lived.
Yes, sir.
And they're certainly in the spotlight for those 4 years. I mean, they're treated well. They got the best medical attention. They got the best training table. They got good coaches. They got they're very little needs. But that goes away. That when you go out and start buying that food for your family,
Yep.
you realize what you had. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
so
So any players that you go ahead, KJ?
Yeah. So how was it watching Refrigerator Perry back in
oh
the day?
man, he was an incredible athlete. His freshman year, he could dunk a basketball.
Whoa.
And yeah, now he
Oh,
weighed
shit.
about 305. He,
Wow.
he could dunk a basketball. And I'll tell you what else he could do. I remember one practice, it was really hot. And we probably were out there for maybe about 45 minutes. And Coach Ford blew the whistle.
Okay.
And he said, "We're going to go swimming in the bike pool." And he could dive off a diving board.
But
You wouldn't believe. I mean, he
Wow.
was he was athletic.
yeah,
He
I
was
know.
very athletic. I am not kidding you. He could go
Wow.
up there and skip and dive off the diving board. Yeah.
But
He was. I mean, you couldn't block him. I mean,
nah,
if he really didn't want. I mean, I remember we played Duke. He knocked the center into the up back and the up back into the punter and blocked the punt.
Man.
So.
the domino effect.
I
Yeah.
mean, he was a man. I mean, he was definitely one of the best players. Him and Chester, and of course his brother Michael Dean was a heck of a player too.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
All right.
You know,
Yeah.
but I think those might be some of the three. Of course, Dabo's had some really good defensive linemen here in the last couple of
Yes,
years,
it
but
has. Good job,
Chester
Dabo.
and Michael Dean and William certainly stand out as some of the best.
Okay. So let's talk about the 2021 season a little bit. I know we got some good players coming back. I mean, you just had the spring game. We can talk about that just a little bit.
I watched a little bit of the spring game. I've actually been to practice, and I would be remiss not to mention the job that Dabo has done in
Oh,
recruiting.
awesome, man.
It's not only does he get the best out of this state. I mean, he's gone to California and New Jersey, and he really recruits by position. And but I'm gonna tell you now, they're gonna miss that tailback.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I tell
Etienne.
that
Oh my God.
Travis Etienne was one of the best I'd seen around here.
Same.
ACC
If not
history
the
legend.
best.
Yeah. He
Yeah,
broke the record.
ain't no doubt. I mean, he was very, very special. I mean,
Yeah,
he had
he
that
was, man.
speed, and he was,
Electrified.
he was hard to bring down, and certainly they're gonna miss Trevor. But um, I think the ukulele or whatever his name is, he's going
Yeah.
to
Oh
be.
yeah.
He can throw the ball now.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, he can throw the ball, and
Yes.
they got receivers. Um,
Mhm.
the running back now, E.J. Dixon, the young freshman that came in, was pretty impressive. Will Shipley from
Okay.
North Carolina.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
The nose guard that was a freshman last year, Brazier or something like that.
Hmm.
They're going to be better, I think, in the offensive line and the defensive line. And I don't know about Justin Ross. I think he was, he practiced, but I don't think he had any contact. But I think he'll be a big factor if he can come back and be healthy and whatnot.
Yeah.
So,
I
Okay.
believe
but they're going. I mean, they're going to be good. They
Yes.
got talent.
that.
Trust me, they're going to be good.
Yeah.
Top 5 good.
At least top 5. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I think some of the other conference teams are getting better. I think North Carolina is doing a good job
Yeah.
of recruiting, and they're getting
Yeah, that's
better.
true.
Florida State's been down. Surely they'll come back.
Oh yeah.
They've always had good athletes. Miami.
Yep.
It's kind of been Clemson and the rest of them. So I think some of those schools will start moving a little bit, getting a little better, more recruits.
Yes.
So out of all the conferences that you coached in and been a part of, which conference you think is the most competitive?
Well, I would say the SEC from top to bottom. You've got Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Florida, Arkansas, Missouri. From time to time they have been competitive. If you look at the national championship, there's been an SEC team in there,
Just about
every
every
year.
year.
And, um, Tennessee's been down, now I don't want to say they're weak links, but they probably haven't been as competitive. And then, somebody would say this about ACC, they'd probably say, well, we don't play, we play Wake
Yeah.
Forest and we play
Yeah.
Duke,
You got
we're
a
not
weak
that
conference.
competitive. But you've got Vanderbilt, and again, the admission standards. I mean, they have some rigorous academic standards to get in school. But I'd say you got Texas A&M in that conference now, in the SEC. So I'd say top to bottom. I think the SEC is the toughest conference in our country.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I got another good question for you. Out of all the eras at Clemson, Ford, West, Bowden, Dabo, can you tell me the difference between those eras and the culture at Clemson?
Well, I think Danny Ford, um, you know, he was tough. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it was, and at that time, I think the game was about toughness. It was running the football. He didn't really, we probably threw the ball
Do too much
8 or 9
passing. Yeah.
times a game.
Hmm.
And so it was really about the offensive line and the defense. We'd win games 17-13, 21-17, 13-10. But I think he was a great recruiter. He was a player's coach. He he wanted kids to have the best. He treated them the best. He wanted them to have the best food.
Yeah.
He was, but he was tough and hard nosed, and they say a team takes on the personality of your coach.
Yep.
So I think our team took on the personality of Danny Ford. We were tough.
All right.
Tommy Bowden was, well, you had Kenny Hatfield that came after him. Kenny was very successful at Arkansas. He was a good coach. He had good assistants. I think probably the biggest downfall that he had is he followed Danny Ford. And Danny Ford was so well liked and had won the national championship. But Kenny Hatfield was a good coach. Maybe not quite as player friendly as Danny Ford was, but a real Christian guy, a real good guy. And then you had Tommy West, who came in after him, and I think Tommy did. He was kind of a Ford disciple, and Tommy was hard nosed as well too. He played at Tennessee. It was a little bit about toughness, and then you had Tommy Bowden came in, and that's kind of when the game started to change.
Yep.
Because Tommy actually came from Tulane. And they were 12-0, and they had a quarterback named Sean
King.
Yep. And Sean King changed the game. I mean, he was. Oh yeah. I compare him to Woody Danforth. He was like Woody Danforth. Could run and throw. Okay. And so there, the wrinkles of the game, the spread. No longer two tight ends, an I formation. You had motion, you had people spread out, you had three receivers, maybe a tailback in a slot. And of course, Tommy did a good job. I mean, he went to bowl games every year. What's that, Kevin?
He had Rod Rodriguez with him. Offensive
player. He had Rich Rod, and Rich Rod was that fast tempo, no huddle. All that, and I, Wake Forest was his downfall. It seemed like every year Wake Forest would beat us, and and finally, I think the last time they beat us, I think he came in and just kind of felt like he didn't have the energy and wanted to step back. So, that was in the middle of the season. And Terry Don told me to go down there and get Dabo out of the offensive staff room. I told him, I said, Terry Don wants to see you. He, me? And I said, yeah. So, I took him down there, and Terry Don said, I'm making you the interim head coach. And he said, you do what you need to do. He said, we'll get squared away financially later on, but he said, and of course, the very first day he fired the offense coordinator, Rob Spence, and then of course, I think Dabo had a vision of what he felt Clemson should be, and he stayed with it. He wanted it to be family. He wanted it to be Christian. He wanted it to take care of the kid. He wanted, and he wanted to recruit the best. I'll never forget Terry Don Phillips, that leg director, and I were flying to Columbia, and we had two school planes at that time. So we drove to the Clemson airport where the hangar was for those school planes. And at that time, Southern Cal had Reggie Bush. And I remember walking into the little terminal, just a little room in the bathroom. I said, y'all need to get a tailback like Reggie Bush.
Reggie Bush.
And Dabo and Burton Burns. Burton Burns was the running back coach who ended up going to Alabama. I think he's the running back coach for the Giants right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Dabo said, "We got one." I said, "What's his name?"
CJ Spiller.
CJ Spiller. Yeah,
that's right.
So CJ was really the spark that got it going. And and then he recruited the Quan Bowers and some
Sammy
other
Watkins.
people. Yep. Sammy Watkins came. And, so he's got it rolling. And but he has a vision, and he stayed on course, and he hasn't changed. He's still the same Dabo. He's sincere. He's authentic. Cares about his kids. And
Okay, so talk about CJ Spiller being the running back coach now, coming back to Clemson and coaching.
CJ.
I think CJ is going to do a tremendous job. I think he has high expectations. He's been in the league 7 or 8 years, moved around a couple places, so he can tell those kids what they can expect to the next level. Like ETN, because he was with them this past year.
Yep.
I think he'll be demanding. I think he'll be great in the home as a recruiter. He can tell his story. So I think, if you look, Dabo has CJ. He has Tony Elliott as the Clemson guy.
Yep.
Tony, what's up?
Streeter, who's the Clemson guy. Got the receiver coach. Can't think of his name right now. Played for the Steelers. So he's got, a lot of Clemson people on his staff. And,
that's good.
Absolutely. Because,
that brings the culture back home, and it makes it bigger and actually better.
Absolutely.
It makes it grow.
It's better together.
Now I understand. So, what if people can find you at, Billy D?
Pardon me?
Social media, and and you have a lot of fans. You're a big guy out there, man. What if people can find you at, man?
I don't know about that. I've been very fortunate. I've had some people help me along the way. I didn't get to be the executive senior associate athletic director or coach at Clemson, or have the opportunity to run Vickery Hall or even IPTAY, be the executive director of IPTAY. I've had a lot of people that have helped me, that saw something in me and encouraged me and helped me along the way. So and I'm grateful for them.
Yep. So do you like the bowl game atmosphere as well? Is that what you look forward to at the end of the year?
Yeah, I tell you, candidly though, I would like to see, I think it ought to go to eight teams
in the playoffs.
Yeah, I do. I think and here's what I'm a little afraid of.
Okay.
I think it's going to always be, Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and somebody else is going to be. I hate the fans might say, "Oh, it's the same old 4 teams." So I'd like to, it's kind of like basketball. I mean, look at what UCLA did in Loyola. You never know. If you get another spot in there. Now, I don't know if they have to play 11 games to make that work instead of 12, or how they could expand it, because I know you got to go to school, and I know that it affects the calendar. But I really think that it should go to 8 and give some other schools an opportunity.
The underdogs a chance.
Yeah.
So do you have any events you're hosting or anything like that? Any social media accounts that people can follow you on if you are hosting any events or anything?
So I'm on Facebook, but I don't ever post anything.
Okay, cool.
So,
no problem.
I mean, that's how I find people like KJ on there. That's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, would you like to send any shout outs to anyone, family members, friends, anybody? Doesn't matter.
Well, you know, I just appreciate anybody that's watching, and like I said, I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to be at Clemson for a long time.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I didn't mention, I was athletic director at Anderson University for 3 years.
Yes, sir.
After I left Clemson. Now, they had 16 sports. There was about 3,600 students there. And, I enjoyed it. The thing that got to me a little bit was I still live in Clemson.
Okay.
So it took me about 35 minutes to get there. And then, you almost had to be at every event as the athletic director there. I don't want to be condescending to Anderson, but it was kind of like a high school. If you had a basketball game at 7:00, you had to be there. You get home at 10. The next night you had a volleyball game, and I had done that for close to 40 years. And so, but a great institution. I had a great president, good kids, good coaches, and I enjoyed it. And as a matter of fact, I still go over there today and talk with the president and all that. So I'm still involved.
All right, man. Well, you guys, go ahead, Coach KJ.
Yeah. So who your top 5 NFL players? We can't leave out like that, Jermaine. That's how
top
you do it.
5 NFL. I'd have to say Saquon Barkley. Let me just tell you, it ain't gonna be AB. Mahomes, naturally. Yeah. I like Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, sir.
That's 3. See.
2 more, Billy D.
I like the safety for the Saints. I can't say. And
Malcolm Jenkins?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. That's a good one.
And
nice.
And what's the running back for the Saints?
Alvin Kamara.
Alvin Kamara.
Okay.
Those are my top 5. I like the running backs. I like the running backs and the quarterbacks.
Well, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, I always root. Now, don't get me wrong. I root for Sammy Watkins and Luke and all of our former players.
Yeah, most definitely. They're doing a good job.
Yeah, they are.
Yep. They are repping. They're repping Clemson real good.
Definitely, man.
So, what type of music you like to listen to, Billy D?
Frank Sinatra.
Okay. Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that.
I'm a 70s guy.
Okay. Yeah, just chilling.
Just chilling.
Cool.
Well, we thank you for coming to our show.
Most definitely.
It was a great time having you. We'd love to have you back.
Love to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, if you got any questions, go ahead.
I appreciate the opportunity. I'll be glad to come back. I appreciate KJ reaching out to me, and appreciate you having me on your show. So
no problem, Billy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Billy D.
All right.
You guys have tuned into another edition of Sports Shop 27. My name is Jermaine Colter, your host, and to my far right, KJ, and in the middle, Clemson Hall of Famer Billy D.
Billy D.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
It's not how you start, but it's how you finish.
Right.
Wear your mask and be safe.
You know what? I got one for you, Jermaine.
All right, what's that, Billy?
It's in the world of give and take, few give what it takes.
Ooh. Nice.
I like that. I'm gonna use that. I'm glad I got it on record. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Billy.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Soon. Yes, sir.
All right.
Love you, man.
Love you too, KJ.
All right.